We have the will, we have the desire to get this done because our citizens are calling on us to protect them so they can feel safe once again in this great city and this incredible state. So, Mr. President, thank you for your time. You being here today sends a powerful message, and we do not forget that you never forgot us at a time when we needed your support the most. And with that, I'd like to introduce an incredible partner that we have representing us, the entire state in Washington, D.C., and that is our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your leadership and your determination to take this scourge of gun violence head on. It really does matter. I want to recognize all my state partners who are sitting here with me, our delegation in Congress, as well as our DAs and our Attorney General. I want to thank each of you for being here. New York has just lost 2 officers who were shot and killed in the line of duty. Detective Wilbert Mora's funeral was yesterday. He was only 27. Last week, I attended the funeral of Detective Jason Rivera, who was only 22. They had their whole lives ahead of them. After that, I stood with Jennifer Pryor, a mom who I first met in 2009. Her brilliant, beautiful daughter, Nyasia, was an honor roll student and on the cheerleading squad. One night when Nyasia was out with her friends celebrating their recent graduation, a stray bullet hit her in the head and killed her instantly. I went to Brooklyn. I met her family. I met her classmates. Losing a child that young is really hard. It's hard for the community and it's hard for everyone. As a mom of 2 young boys who are about that age right now, I can't imagine the horror or the pain that a parent lives through to keep going forward every day. And as a senator, I made a commitment that we would take action and do what we could on the federal level to stop the senseless gun violence in our cities, in our state, in our country. Now, New York is not unique, but it does have a particular problem. Almost 90% of the guns used in crimes in our city are trafficked guns, just as the governor said. So our approach to combating gun violence has to include dealing with these trafficked weapons. Right now, there's literally no federal law that makes it illegal to cross a state line with a trunk full of guns, get on a bus with a bag full of guns, get in your car and drive up the Iron Pipeline and sell them directly out of the back of a truck into the arms of criminals in our city. We have to change that. It's really pretty simple. We have to keep these illegal guns off of our streets, out of the hands of those who could not buy them legally. We have to work hand in glove across federal, state, and local government lines. We have to pass the common sense gun reforms that the president talked about, that our mayor wants, that our attorney general fights for. We have strong partners here. I believe between all of us here today, we can do this. The bill that many of us have been working on in Washington is called the Hadia Pendleton and Nyasia Pryor Yard Gun Trafficking and Crime Prevention Act, which would establish gun trafficking as a federal crime and go upstream to address all responsible parties. The traffickers buying the guns and transporting them across state lines, the gun dealers who knowingly facilitate or recklessly disregard the warning signs of gun trafficking, and the kingpins and organizers who plan the trafficking. When similar legislation was brought up in 2013 for a vote, it got 58 votes. You know, in the Senate, we have to get 60. It was the closest we got to any common sense gun reform. This is a gun that this is a bill that Commissioner Kelly helped me write. And so I know with our new police commissioner, and I know with our governor and our mayor, and with our president, we can get this done this year. We cannot have more stories of 4-year-olds dying on park benches in Brooklyn. We cannot have more stories of moms and their movement speaking out, begging leaders to do what's right. We can do this, and we will. Now I'd like to introduce Hakeem Jeffries.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, to President Biden, Mayor Adams, Governor Hochul, General Garland, Commissioner Sewell, all my colleagues government men and women of the NYPD. President Biden, thank you for your leadership, your partnership, for your presence here in New York City. We believe the greatest city in the world, Wilmington. But every great city, of course, has challenges, and the stunning rise in gun violence is a major challenge for us to address. But we recognize, as you have indicated, it's a national challenge. Think about the dynamic that we are confronting here in America. We have 4% of the world's population, but 40% of the world's guns. That means there are more than 300 million guns circulating in the United States of America. And many of those guns, such as the one used to strike down two heroes, Detective Rivera and Detective Mora, are weapons of war. They're not used to hunt deer, they're used to hunt human beings. That's not acceptable. Many of those guns too easily fall into the hands of violent individuals in far too many communities, such as many that I represent in central Brooklyn and across America. That's not acceptable, and far too many of those guns are illegally trafficked from other places into this great metropolis. That's not acceptable. So it's an all hands on deck approach that will require tremendous leadership, as is being provided by our president, our governor, and our mayor, and our congressional delegation at all levels of government, city, state, and federal. And the congressional delegation in the House, Representatives Velasquez, Nadler, Espaillat, Meng, Swazi, and others, we stand ready to partner with you to get done what needs to happen to deal with this gun violence scourge with the fierce urgency of now, to make sure that we balance the interests of public safety and that important American principle of liberty and justice for all, and invest in communities that have traditionally been left behind to create opportunity in every single zip code. A tough moment for us in the city, but we're a resilient community, a resilient city, a resilient country. You can knock us down, but never knock us out, and together we will get this done. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. President. I now yield to my good friend, whose district we are in, here in Lower Manhattan, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez.
Well, I don't know if you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Mr. President, it is such an honor, and it is so comforting to the men and women in uniform, to the mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters who have suffered because of gun violence in our country, to the Attorney General Garland, Governor Hochul, and Mayor Adams. Thank you for making it possible, but also in recognizing that it takes all of us working together. To my New York congressional delegation, I want to recognize the incredible role that we have played in working together with this administration to make sure that we secure the resources, not only to deal with gun violence in our country, but to tackle the issue of the pandemic, to provide relief assistance to small businesses in our country. And I am proud that we have been able to get this economy growing again, that because of the commitment and vision of President Biden. Since the start of the pandemic, gun violence in our city has surged to levels not seen in a decade. Shootings are up by 166% here in New York City. Across the US, over 20,000 2,000 people were killed by gun violence last year. Black and brown communities. We are victims of gun violence. It takes us also, because we are on the ground. We know what works and what doesn't work. We got the expertise, and we need to use all those grassroots community organizations who understand the dynamics that play into gun violence in our country. So these statistics are not just numbers. Each represents a lost member of our communities. We must recognize that mobilizing community-based resources, job opportunities, and early intervention are key to protecting our youth from gun violence. We must also, once and for all, crack down on the iron pipeline of illegal guns being funneled into states like New York. This is just not a public safety issue, but one that requires partnerships with healthcare institutions, school, job-creating programs, churches. As Hakeem Jeffrey just said, we are all hands on deck. This is how we're going to tackle this issue. And I want to recognize Los Sures Anti-Violence Program in North Brooklyn, working with NYCHA, New York City Housing Public Authority, and they are working to stem the gun violence issue in public housing. They have been successful. It is proven. It can work. Let's do it. Thank you. And it's my honor to introduce the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chairman Jerry Nadler. You have it there.
Well, thank you very much. I obviously agree with everything that's been said, and I certainly thank the president for his support for the actions he's taking to bring money to New York, for his support of legislation in order to solve this problem. You know, it is said that by the NRA, and I remember in 2004 when we passed, when a Republican Congress passed that bill to exempt gun manufacturers from lawsuits because they were being sued on the model of the tobacco companies who had been sued for falsifying the information about the toxicity of their product. And they managed to pass this legislation, which is still on the books. And the president, who was then a senator, was instrumental in 1994 in getting the assault weapons ban passed. But it was a 10-year bill, and it was allowed to expire in 2004, and I wish we could get it back. The legislation that we have passed in Congress is wholly inadequate. Now, the Judiciary Committee has passed, the House has passed two bills, H.R. 8, which requires a background check on every gun or transfer with limited exceptions, such as family members. We passed the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021 last March, which addresses the Charleston loophole in background check procedures. This loophole is that when an individual attempts to purchase a firearm from a licensed dealer, the FBI has 3 days to complete a background check. And if the background check isn't completed in 3 days, he gets the gun, even if the background check would come back in 4 or 5 days and say that this person is a dangerous person to have the gun. So we passed the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021, which addresses this deficiency by providing the FBI additional time to complete background checks, gives notice to the FBI about which cases need to be prioritized for review. And the Judiciary Committee in October of last year, only a few months ago, reported favorably out of committee Lucy McBath's bill, red flag bill, which would create a federal extreme risk or red flag law, as we call it, that would prevent firearms from being accessible to those who are a danger to themselves and others. The bill would create procedures for federal courts to issue extreme risk protection orders to prohibit a person from purchasing, possessing, or receiving a firearm or ammunition. Under the bill, a family or household member or a law enforcement officer can petition the court for an extreme risk protection order with respect to an individual who poses a risk to themselves or others. The bill also adds people who are subject to an extreme risk protection order to the categories of persons prohibited from purchasing, shipping, transporting, possessing, or receiving a firearm or ammunition under federal law. Now, in the last Congress, in the 116th Congress, the Senate companion to this bill was introduced by Lindsey Graham. The concept was championed by none other than President Trump in a series of 2019 statements on mass shootings. Senator Graham has not reintroduced the bill yet in the 117th Congress, but we're talking to him. Leadership has expressed support, given its bipartisan origins and outreach by Representative McBath and others, by committee staff. The bill, we hope, will find Republican support of the House floor, and I believe that this bill is the best hope for legislative action on gun violence in what remains of this Congress. Now, of course, this is wholly inadequate. And that's why everything the President is talking about and the Attorney General is talking about doing by executive order, which should be law, but we haven't been able to make it law, should be done by executive order, and hopefully, eventually by law.
Thank you so much, the entire congressional delegation. We want to now, I know the police commissioner has to depart to go to the walkout for one of the officers that was shot a few nights ago. Police commissioner, if you want to say a few comments, and then we'll turn it over to the task force to give a presentation on what they're doing every day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. President and Attorney General Garland, thank you so much for coming to witness firsthand what the NYPD and our law enforcement partners are doing to end the proliferation of illegal guns and shootings in New York City. We know across the cities and major areas in this country, they're experiencing an uptick in violence, a growing number of shootings, and guns on their streets, and New York City has not been immune. Experts will likely debate this for years, but we do not have years. There are too many people carrying guns who are not afraid to use them. Our officers are out there engaging, and they are doing what literally is the most dangerous thing a police officer can do. They are taking guns out of the hands of criminals on our streets, and our officers are paying a heavy price for it. It cannot be overstated that since the beginning of the year, we have had 6 of our own officers shot, and tragically 2 of them killed. And Mr. President and Attorney General Garland, I want to thank you for your outpouring of support and your condolences during this time, during the loss of our members. It's sincerely appreciated. In fact, again, as the mayor said, we have to excuse ourselves because a little bit of good news, one of our officers is being released from the hospital today, so we're going to head over there. Despite a record number of gun arrests and seizures by the police, the communities and our citizens continue to pay a horrific price. We've seen our citizens suffer from this violence. Bystanders, unintended targets, babies, and people simply trying to do their jobs. We know this violence is not acceptable against our citizens or our police officers. And we know that it has to be stopped. And we know that it starts here in the NYPD with action. That is why the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership was started. What you are seeing here today, Mr. President, is every component of law enforcement in New York literally at the table. This morning, we're going to do what this group does every day. We're going to go over the shootings, the suspects, the guns, the shell casings, the facts to connect the dots. They will go around the table. We're going to use every tool, talent, and resource available through every agency to focus on the very few who are responsible for the largest number of shootings in our city. And we intend to use every legal tool at our disposal to remove them from our communities. This is about the life of a city, but it's also about the lives of the people who make up this city. And together, with this partnership, we know that we will not fail. It's an extraordinary meeting. I've been a part of it. These are truly professionals. And I want to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Chauncey Parker, who's basically like the quarterback of this team.
Before that, you do that, Deputy Commissioner, since this is sensitive information, time, we're going to ask, because this is sensitive information that is shared. And so if personnel could help us clear the room.